PM Mukhi Memorial Human Rights Lecture. This is a lecture where every year we hold an event which is dedicated to continuing the vital conversations which are not only historical but contemporary conversations on justice and human dignity. Now, today we are here to discuss a movement which has led to one of the most transformative piece of legislation that reshaped India's democracy. It shifted from a culture of secrecy and silence to a culture of transparency and openness and participation. And there is perhaps no one better to guide us through this journey than our keynote speaker, Nikhil. For over 4 decades now, Nikhil has not just been an observer, but a principal architect of this transformation. As a founding member of the Mazdoor, Kisan, Shakti Sangathan, also called as MKSS, he was on the front lines championing the people's right to question, to know, and to hold power accountable. His work, from the grassroots of Rajasthan to the halls of parliament, was instrumental in birthing our revolutionary Right to Information Act. This October 12th was when the act turned 20. This cause resonates deeply on a personal level. My own journey with the RTI Act began in college in Delhi University in 2002-2003, when MKSS was mobilizing people, introducing the idea of NCPRI, which is National Campaign for People's Right to Information, and they were holding different conventions. And as a young person, I had not heard till then a more revolutionary idea that we can actually ask for any information and a piece of law will ensure that we have it on our doorsteps. Later, as a campaigner with the Bhopal gas survivors, I saw its power firsthand using the RTI, also in conjunction with the right to life, to secure critical information from a reluctant state. Eventually, in my PhD also, I got very good and useful piece of information, and in a very timely, efficient manner, which works to a poorly funded PhD student. So it produced very critical data in a very time-efficient manner. And when I joined IISER, the story did not end. Even at IISER, the RTI has become a living tool. I have seen our own student using it to query hostel usage, a process I experienced from the other side as the chairperson of the hostel committee a few years ago, tasked with delivering that very key information. Our alumni have also used it to scrutinize diversity representation in IISER, proving that the spirit of accountability thrives right here in our own very community. I'm sure many of us who have gathered today have used or engaged or at least know about this right to information, and also a bit concerned about what is happening or what is proposed to happen to this very critical piece of right. This, on one hand, this demonstrates the incredible journey of the RTI from a national movement to our own very doorsteps, but it is also a history of a movement in a way, a people's movement which began not in urban areas, but in a small village in Rajasthan. What an extraordinary piece of legislation brought to Indian citizens through the effort of the ordinaries, or you can say what Gandhi said, poorest of the poor, if there is a definition for one. PM Mukhi Memorial Lecture, in my view, was a great opportunity to bring this stage together, bring Nikhil here, talk about RTI in its 20th year, and also when RTI is dealing with key threats, the Data Protection Act and different bills and amendments that are coming, which we need to know more about. But I think also a story of people who contributed so much, who innovated that piece of legislation, which Nikhil has told me several times that people of India have used RTI far more innovatively than the movement ever conceived or thought of at this stage. And that's a story not just of movement then it is a story of India and Indian citizens. If you give an empowering tool in the hands of people, how people use it in different contexts to ask, to know, and to make use of that information. PM Mukhi Memorial Lecture gives us this stage where we are honoring the memory, on one hand, of Justice Mukhi, about whom I would invite my colleague, Professor Sunil Mukhi, who is a professor in physics department at IISER, to give us a little bit of introduction to the legacy of Justice Mukhi and what was the intent of this lecture, but also within the movement of RTI, where people have used RTI, and those stalwarts are no more there. And that brings us to a key junction also, why and how now RTI movement is thinking of a RTI museum. So I would first invite Professor Mukhi to talk about memory mobilization through this PM Memorial Lecture, and then Nikhil Day. I hope you will give a big round of applause to both my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. So I speak in this room regularly, but this occasion always makes me very nervous. Still, let me start by thanking Nikhil for kindly agreeing to give the lecture and taking away his valuable time for this, and all of you for coming. It's really a pleasure to have all of you here. So my father was a lawyer and then a High Court judge. And in his memory, me and my family have given an endowment to IISER Pune to have this lecture series every year. And this is the 7th. We missed 1 year in COVID. Actually, the timing went a little off because of the lockdown. But otherwise, we have had several speakers. Last year, we had retired High Court Judge Justice Gautam Patel. Year before, we had Dr. Suhas Palshikar, very eminent scholar based in Pune, and so on. So my father was actually born in Hyderabad, Sindh, which is now in Pakistan, and which was then in undivided India, and migrated during partition, he and my mother, to Delhi and then to Bombay, and settled, and then he took up practice of law. One thing I want to say is I feel grateful to my parents that after going through this trauma of displacement, they never held any personal animosity against people of any other religion or anything else. They felt that their friends back where they were true friends, but circumstances had separated them and they had no choice but to move. They always spoke warmly of the people they left behind. Now, my father worked as a lawyer through the 1950s and 60s. In 72, he became a judge of the High Court in Bombay, and then he worked for 4 years until he passed away in 1976 at a rather young age of 58. And I'll come to that in a minute. I want to quote something that was said in an obituary after he passed away. It's a little bit flattering, but I think it has something interesting in it. It says, he was compassionate by nature and generous with his time and talk. He was intensely emotional and a very great helper. His heart bled for the underdog, and he never gave thought to the consequence of doing justice. However, he did have to face a consequence for doing justice. He strongly supported freedom of speech and of the press as a High Court judge, very reasonably because that is enshrined in the Constitution of India. And during the emergency time, among other things, he quashed an order passed by the central government blacklisting the Indian Express newspaper. He quashed that as being an illegal order. At this point, he then became, for the government, what were thought of as inconvenient judges they didn't like. And they started transferring them in 1976. And my father was one of the small number of people given a transfer order. As I've said, he was intensely emotional. He did not like this. He was really angry. It was not the transfer, but the fact that it was being done vindictively. And this aggravated his heart condition, and he passed away in the same year. So that's his history. Now, there are two things I don't want to say more about him. Just to say that I think this series is really a fitting tribute to his memory, and I think he would have certainly enjoyed the lectures and engaged in arguments with the speakers afterwards. So I want to just tell you two things. One is that there's a very famous Supreme Court judgment in India on the so-called Puttaswamy case on right to privacy, and I felt that these lines really set the tone for today's talk. The judges wrote, I think it was a 9-judge bench, if I'm remembering right. Those who are governed are entitled to question those who govern about the discharge of their constitutional duties, including in the provision of socio-economic welfare benefits. The power to scrutinize and to reason enables the citizens of a democratic polity to make informed decisions on basic issues which govern their rights. And this is what the Supreme Court of the country has said, and this is what I believe in, and I think my father did not live to see this judgment, but I'm pretty sure he would have approved of this line in particular. Now, last thing, just a little anecdote before I go, is about RTI, since that's the subject of the talk. So about 5 years ago, so this is a story that probably I shouldn't tell, but I'm a retired person, so I'm become very reckless. 5 years ago, a bureaucrat of the Education Ministry, finding that we had no chair of board of governors in this institute, appointed himself as the chair and started to function as the chair, and came here and convened board of governors meetings as the chair. And during this process, he claimed that all our faculty appointments of young faculty were illegal, and whoever had been appointed or promoted would have to be demoted or de-appointed. And in vain, some of us, I was dean of faculty at the time, told him that this would destroy the institute. I'm talking to some of the faculty here. I mean, you would have been demoted or fired by this person who was only a master of MA in economics and had no connection with anything that we do. Now we struggled quite hard against and pushed back quite hard against what he was trying to do, and nothing was working. And at some point in frustration, I, as a private individual, filed an RTI with the Ministry of HRD, as it was known, saying, kindly provide the appointment letter of Mr. X as the acting chair board of governors of IISER Pune. Now, my registrar, who's now left us, unfortunately, who has moved to another place, but who was a wonderful person over here, people here know him, told me that from that day, he stopped hearing from this guy. And in Delhi, there was a mad scramble to find chairs of boards. Oh, in my RTI, I also said, how many boards of governors of IISERs in the country have no chair, and for how long? And several IISERs had no chair of board of governors for like a year, 2 years. And suddenly there was a mad scramble, and these empty posts were all filled. We got a very nice chair, and we were able to function again. And some of you who might not have been here are here. So yeah, sometimes be reckless and file RTIs, and then sometimes also recklessly talk about it in front of a camera.
Thank you so much, Sunil ji. I would like to begin by saying I hope filing of RTIs is not reckless anymore. And I hope that everything that I say is that this is how we should be. This is how the country should be, and this is how we should function. And this is how we should all play a role, that fantastic RTI. And there are millions of such stories. I want to begin by saying that this idea, I did not know Justice Mukhi. I've read bits about him and heard what I've heard. But I think the idea of memorial lectures in all our families, I know we do one in my father's name, is extremely important for a family also to try and connect with public causes. Somewhere in our families are people who have been much beyond just the family and have thought about public issues. And I think for us to find those people and give platforms and try and do things encourages people not just within the family but within a much larger community. So I want to say that. And I also want to use this opportunity to pay tribute to 3 people from Pune at the very outset who have played a very important role. I may forget as I go through with this lecture, who played a very important role in the RTI overall. One was a journalist, he was called Prakash Kardale. The Indian Express he edited, and he relentlessly ran a campaign for use of RTI, for pushing it while the law was coming, for looking at various things within it. Passed away much earlier than he did not live the period we could have used his advantage in doing it. Another person was Madhav Godbole, who provided some very, very interesting parts to the law, including formulations in the Maharashtra law as it was going along, but also in the central law, and as a bureaucrat, former bureaucrat. And the third person is Justice P.B. Sawant, who actually took the People's Law, made it a draft of the Press Council of India, and then made sure that that draft would be pushed from the Press Council for huge public consultations, and was sent to every member of parliament and to the government, and gave it a position from which it was very difficult to reduce it. And it was a very, very powerful law. Powerful law as so many of our laws that comes from people's movements are, but when it got the backing of the Press Council of India officially, it brought it to a level where it was very difficult for government committees to reduce it from then. And then later on, when it went to the National Advisory Council much later, it stood as a draft, as a people's draft, but a people's draft within this democratic structure. So I just wanted to put that out there to begin with. I'm sorry I did not put my phone on silent, so if you'll just give me 1 second. And I will make sure this is something I should have done. Yeah. So this topic that we have today, moving from a culture, it's not just RTI, moving from a culture of secrecy and silence to a culture of openness and participation. And it's a 20-year battle for India's soul. Now, the topic itself has been placed at such a much higher level than something that is what is in section 6 of the RTI, or what is in section 8 of exemptions in the RTI. Very often when I go to RTI meetings, smaller, bigger than this, everyone in India actually knows, who are using the RTI, know its letter, subsection, argue, are very angry with information commissions, angrier still with public information officers. They are like lawyers. They are all like citizens lawyers or citizens activists with full knowledge of the law. But today I want to speak a little bit, taking 2 steps back, and at the broader picture, and the broader picture from where I begin. Actually, we haven't put those slides. Can we? Yeah. So there are going to be slides just to show that what I have to say is not coming from me, it's coming from very ordinary people. That's the hut where the MKSS is based, and from where the discussions on RTI took place, from where they originated, and that in this country, and they're just going to be slides, I'll make mention of them, they'll just move on a loop. But just so that it's not me and not my face, but actually the face of many people at different parts of Indian society that made a huge difference to this RTI law. And it's ordinary people from that little village and that little spot. And I will make references, you'll see these several times on a loop. Actually, maybe I should just once. So this is the only monument in the world, actually it's in the middle of the Byawar marketplace, where the Municipal Council of Byawar said we will build an RTI memorial, which is the place where in 1996, for 44 days, we sat on dharna, and it led to the National Campaign for People's Right to Information formation, as well as a national campaign leading to the RTI law. This is in Byawar. At different points in Byawar, at the various gates of Byawar. This is in Jaipur, demanding the RTI law at Statue Circle, which is now out of bounds to people. But we often say that RTI and NREJ were formed at Statue Circle and drafted at Statue Circle. These are the various dharnas, rallies through various parts of the state that took place for the RTI. These are the people, many of whom I'll refer to, whose photos are here, who fought for the RTI in the MKSS, and there are thousands of others. But within the MKSS, some who fought, very ordinary people who fought very, very prominent battles. I'll get to the 2 or 3 other photographs that haven't come there, but just so that you have a little bit of an idea. So it's not a talk, as I said, about sections and subsections, but it's a talk about a set of people looking for their rights in the midst of a very feudal and a very colonial administration, a very feudal society and a very colonial administration. So what happened when I am starting the story in the early mid 1980s, very bad drought in Rajasthan. In that little hut we go and stay, 3-4 of us. People say that it's very difficult to even survive in this drought. And so they don't ask RTI. Even today they would not use the term RTI. But they start saying that we want work, we want food, we want survival. And if you've come to work with the poor and we want to build an organization of the poor, which we built 3 years later, Mazdoor, Kisan, Shakti, Sangathan, then we should get work and we should get wages. So they start their story there. And they confront a feudal society, then they confront a colonial administration, both of which understand that information is power. Both of which understand that behind exploitation, it's extremely important to hide that exploitation, particularly in a so-called democratic framework. Both of which understand that even though independence has come, there are mechanisms by which you can keep people away from power. And information is a very important screen. And even though the feudal structure understands that you have now, in a modern constitutional framework of equality, of caste, of gender, you can make society again through information by keeping your caste hierarchies going, by keeping your jati panchayats going, by keeping various other things going, you can keep people away from power. So that's the framework in which people begin to just say, we want work, har haath ko kaam do, kaam ka pura daam do. And when they start asking for work and get work, with great difficulty, they don't get even their minimum wage. So they start mobilizing for minimum wages. And when they mobilize for minimum wages, they realize they are not getting even half. At that time when we started, the minimum wage was 11 rupees a day. They were getting 5 rupees, 4 rupees, 8 rupees, 2 rupees a day. And when they asked, why are we not getting it? They got an answer, kaam chor ho. The poor are always considered thieves and liars. तो काम चोर हो और आप लोगों ने काम नहीं किया इसलिए कम पैसा मिल रहा है. That's why, because you have not worked, you are getting less money. So the demand arose, show us where we've done less work. We've been here for 8 hours, we are willing to do whatever work, we measured out things, we did everything, and that was in the records. That was hidden behind the records. When the records came out, and that's a 4-year story of trying to get those records out, when the records came out, what was found? That the people who did not exist, the dead people who were on the muster rolls, whose names had just been cooked up, who had never lived in that area, the ghosts, as it were, they were getting full wages. And those who were on the work site were the ones who were getting half wages because it was stolen from them and being given to others who had written their names. So what do we get in that period? And I'm going to talk about people's articulation in terms of this battle for India's soul, in terms of changing a culture, in terms of what RTI means beyond its letter. You have Mohanji, a person who in our hunger strikes at that time for minimum wages, he's never been to school, he's a Dalit. He's part of that group that's demanding minimum wages, and we are on a hunger strike, and he goes out in the summer sun of Rajasthan, and I'm going to give you 5-6 of these anecdotes. And he makes a song, because he's a bhajanchi, he makes a song as he's standing up, without writing it ever. And the song goes, Raj choron ka, pehle wale chor जंगलों में रहते थे, आजकल के चोर बंगलों में रहते हैं, राज चोरों का. The thieves of yore lived in jungles, the thieves of today live in bungalows. But his next line is, पहले वाले चोर बंदूकों से मारते थे, आजकल के चोर कलम से मारते हैं, राज चोरों का. So Mohanji starts to understand through his song, an articulation we didn't have as then, at that point, that they are killing you through what they do through their records. And so when those records started coming out and we took a decision that, okay, now we understand, as soon as we understood that we could see that informally, that people who did not exist had been paid the full wage, and we said, bring this out. The administration immediately paid full wages to everyone who was making that demand. They were refusing to pay on any other basis, but they knew and they got scared, very scared, that this would have consequences for them. And so when we sat down with that whole set of experiences, again that same Mohanji said, and said strongly that जब तक ये record बाहर नहीं निकले, तब तक हम हमेशा चोर माने जाएंगे और जो असली चोर है वो साहूकार बने रहेंगे. Those who are these exalted positions of Sarpanch Saab, Junior Engineer Saab, Collector Saab, actually they are common thieves. And those records are what proves what they are. And they are calling us thieves, whereas we are the people who have worked and slogged. So we began this thing of show us the muster rolls. What was RTI in Rajasthan? Muster roll dikhao. All over the state this began, muster roll dikhao. And we got an order initially from we had to go right up to the collector. Sarpanch said no, BDO said no, collector said, we said on this one work where we will show you people work, show us the muster rolls. And so he issued an order. And I remember Shankar and Aruna and I, all three of us in our early days, that period we went and we gave the order to the Sarpanch, and he said, yes, take it to the mate. The mate is the lowest of the people in that thing. And the mate, who we had been arguing with for 2 months, he looked at the order and he put the muster roll under his arm and he ran. And we ran after him. It was so undignified, I still remember. and Aruna didn't run, but Shankar and I ran. And then we chased him and he went round a tree and we went round the tree. And then he finally ran up the hill and we stopped. And we said something's wrong with us also. So, but that was the level at which they were not willing to give information. Those were the times when we started realizing that we had hit a nerve center. Why was he running? Because he knew that contained the way in which we could get justice. Those are the anecdotes that taught us at that moment how important it was. And then we realized that when you got that, we saw in those muster rolls all those names, but we didn't have proof of it. And when we told people also, we had no proof. So we started informally. By then we had these networks within the offices. We would go and copy by hand. We would get photocopies in a whole lot of places just by chance, just through illegal, informal means. And we started planning these series of 6 Jan Sunwais, which I would call, in this series of anecdotes, the Jan Sunwai breakthrough. And we took those records around, which we had copied by hand or we had some copies of. And it completely transformed the whole scenario. We had been asking for action on corruption. We had been asking for wages to be paid. We had been saying school buildings that we saw in the records showed it was complete and there were no doors, no windows, no roof. And it was shown as they had put a whole lot of roofing material and doors and windows, wheels were there, whereas there was none of that. And as soon as we held the public hearing, we understood that information and bringing it in the public domain causes a chemical reaction. Everything changes. That's what media does, but media was not willing to report, oh, chota sa hai, your small village one matter, look at Lalu Prasad Yadav, what he's doing, or look at someone else, what he's doing. And we said for them, it's everything, it's their wage. That public hearing brought a number of things together. It brought an alliance between the middle class and the poor of the village. The poor had always been demanding wages. Now when they showed they were not getting their wage for a school building or for a hospital or for a road on which the middle class had to take their motorcycle to take their children to a hospital or their kids to go to school or something of that nature, they said, now go forward, speak out.
And when we were under attack during these early public hearings from the most powerful distributing liquor, it is this alliance of the poor and the middle class that saved us. People brought us into their homes. They said, don't sleep there at night. There's a plan to attack you. They said they are not going to allow the tents to be put. We will make sure the tents are put. And so I don't have those pictures. One Fauji, who would have never been on our side, he came to us and said, tent nahi laga rahe hain, main laya hu parachute. Somewhere he stole his parachute. When he came back, retirement se main laya hu parachute, uski niche tent lagayenge. So one of our first public hearings was held under parachute because they were not allowing the tents even to come. So these are powerful stories that teach you so much in that area. And people started fighting and the entire Gram Sevaks went on strike. When we did finally, they had to agree, and again it's a long story, the chief minister of that time, Bhairu Singh Shekhawat, said you will get it. And their method was first just promise and don't deliver. Tire them out. So he said, yeah, you will get it. But he wasn't giving it. So for 1 year, we took the assembly transcript everywhere, that he had promised the right to information, at least in panchayat and local government records. And for 1 year, we traveled across the state and nothing happened. And we just kept going to him. And the chief secretary who was there at that time and his principal secretary, who was a friend of ours, said, yes, of course. Who do you think wrote it in? Who do you think wrote those lines? I wrote it. So we said, you wrote it, do it, please. And he said, nahi, hum thuk ke bhi chaat sakte hain. We can say it and we can take it back. So that led to that 44-day dharna. And the first day of the dharna, they panicked. It was in the middle of a marketplace, and that marketplace where you can't actually see the market, but the memorial. They panicked and they issued an order saying you can see. Now we knew with seeing, we had that experience that unless you had the copy, you couldn't do anything. So we said, we want copies. What's your problem? And they said, no, we can't put photocopying machines all over the state. This was 1996. They had machines all over the state, but they just said that. And for a year, they set up a committee headed by the chief secretary to see how we will get photocopies. And we were accused in Jaipur, actually in a press conference, of saying, we have been told you are agents of Modi Xerox. Why do you want Xerox? That time, Xerox was known as the machine and Modi was the company. Now Modi is known as for other things. So that was the kind of denial that took place. And we saw that when you match papers with people's testimonies themselves, my name is there, my father's name is there, or the dead person's name is there, or the voter list, and the people are there. That's what you've copied into it. It is dynamite. It changes power. And information as power comes home to people. And things get sorted out very quickly. Shankar often uses the term that, when he gives the example that what is RTI to us, when someone goes into Dantakasi, I don't know what you say, when you get into a thing where your jaw gets locked and locked jaw. So he said, what do? You close their nose. Their jaw is locked, but you close their nose. To breathe, they open their mouth. So he said, you have to use that. Your problem is somewhere else, but you have to use the RTI to open their mouth. And as soon as you use the RTI, you get that nerve center and they open their mouth. So these were ideas that became very clear by the early 90s. Now I want to talk about some of the just there was a woman called Sushila. Some of the communication of these concepts which was so powerful. I'm sitting in behind an academic institution. Often we think we are the ones who articulate. Nandini is here actually. She knows how good, and she writes about how good people's articulation is, but we must pay tribute to that. Because that's what builds a culture. That's what builds what it is that we want to know. That's what builds the insides of it. So one of the first things that when we were looking for how do we describe this particular thing and we sat on Dharna, Sushila and others made some naras. And one nara, I'll tell you when, after 44 days when we went to Delhi, and VP Singh was also one of the people in this meeting which Justice P.B. Sawant had called. He had called ex-MPs, he had called Mr. VP Singh, he had called others.
And there was a press person who asked Sushila was dressed, our whole group was mainly women and they were called the Ghagra Paltan. Ye Ghagra Paltan kya karega? People kept asking us. And they kept asking us, what is this right to information? Even good friends in radical circles said, na roti, na jameen, we were fighting for minimum wages and land. Ye kya chalu kar diya apne Suchna ka Adhikar? You are some kind of esoteric characters. So when they asked Sushila kitni padhi likhi ho, and she was wearing a lehenga and lugdi, and she said चौथी पास हूँ. तो आपका क्या लेना देना RTI से चौथी पास? ये तो कोई पढ़े लिखे ही काम में लेंगे. And she said, देखो भाई साहब, and she used that slogan, huh? And that's why I'll give that articulation. जब मैं मेरे 10 साल के बच्चे को 10 रुपए के साथ, that's Sushila, 10 साल के बच्चे को 10 रुपए के साथ बाजार भेजती हूँ और कहती हूँ कि थोड़ा सा एक नमक की थैली ले आना, थोड़ा चाय की पत्ती और थोड़ा शक्कर ले आना, वापस आता है तो मैं उससे हिसाब मांगती हूँ. सरकार मेरे नाम पर अरबों खरबों रुपए खर्च करती है, क्या मैं उनसे हिसाब नहीं मांगूंगी? हमारा पैसा हमारा हिसाब. It was a brilliant formulation. And in 4 words, it is what is used as the RTI slogan across the country. 4 words explains RTI, explains democracy, explains people's rights over every rupee that's there in the country or every paisa that's there in the country. That was Sushila. Prabhash Joshi ji, really well-known journalist, Indian Express editor of both the Indian Express and Jansatta at the same time, the only Hindi journalist to have held both positions. He came to the dharna on the 3rd day. And we said, will you speak? He said, I don't know. I don't know whether I'll speak or not. And he sat all day listening. And at the end of it, he just went up and said one line. He said, मैं ये लड़ाई हमें लड़नी चाहिए थी, हमारी रोजी रोटी थी. For journalists, it's our bread and butter. इस देश की जनता लड़ रही है, उनको मैं नमन करने आया हूँ, धन्यवाद देने आया हूँ. Went back and wrote a piece which was again picking up another slogan, and he picked it up and in a sense made it so powerful. The slogan was, हम जानेंगे, हम जिएंगे. The right to know, the right to live. Why? Why did we use the slogan? Why did we use many slogans, but why did he pick that up and why did we use it? Because you don't get your wage, how do you survive? We were asking for ration information. If you don't get your ration register, how do you get your rations? If you don't get your medicine register, how do you get your medicines? So your daily survival, your land which is taken away from you, if you don't get that information, how do you manage to hold on to your land? Daily survival depends on this. And therefore, Prabhash Joshi's thing, which said, hum janenge, hum jiyenge, also came further. And little later, this very slogan went into the Delhi High Court when it was looking at the Supreme Court judges having not declared their assets and not said whether they declared their assets or not. A lower court was looking at a higher court, and the higher court had refused, the Supreme Court had refused to give their assets. The Chief Justice had refused to give an answer. And it came in appeal through the Information Commission to one judge who said it should be given. Then it came to 2 judges, one who could have been here, Justice A.P. Shah, and the other was Justice Muralidhar. The 2 of them said that absolutely it should be given. And actually, irony of ironies is the Supreme Court went in appeal against that to itself, which is as much against the principles of natural justice as you can go, but it did. But even there, it could not rule against the fact that you have to give those assets. But in that judgment, they mentioned that the right to information movement of Rajasthan has changed the discourse from around the world. It is no longer just freedom of expression under Article 19(1)(a). It is also the right to life under Article 21. It is also the right to equality under Article 14. Because how can you know if you're being treated equally unless you have information? How can you know whether someone qualifies to be the chairperson of the board unless you know what are his qualifications and who has been advertised or not? How can you select between people who are supposed to be selected in a
particular way unless you know. So very powerful articulations have got into our structure about what it is and how we need to fight for those, which is again beyond one section or subsection. Shankar had, I wish I could have shown those songs, came up, who's Aruna and Shankar and I were the ones who went there originally. Aruna is well known, Shankar is also very well known and is one of the most popular, in a sense, people's communicators or a bard of the people. He came up with a song along with people, two very powerful songs which are very good articulations. One was Main Nahi Manga. Kya mang rahe ho bhai? He comes in like a kind of play. And he says, क्या मांग रहे हो? सोना चांदी नहीं मांग रहे. महल मालियाँ, बड़े महल नहीं मांग रहे. मोटा बंगला, बंगले में गाड़ी, बाड़ी में कुत्ता, कुत्ते पर पट्टो. All the symbols that all of us. नहीं मांग रहे, ये तो सब अमीरों का है, चोरों का है. तो क्या मांग रहे हो? And it turns to, हमें तो पैसा ना wages मिलते हैं ना ये. तो he said, वो finally arrives at मस्टरों की नकलें हम मांगे. बिल वाउचर हम मांगे, विकास का खर्चा हम मांगे, देश का खर्चा हम मांगे. So it explained it in 2 minutes so powerfully what exactly you were demanding and who was demanding what. You were not demanding something unreasonable, you were demanding something that was worth it for everyone. And then there was a group of women who came and sang a Krishna, Kanudo Makhan Khagyo le, koi to mungde bolo. Krishna has come and eaten on the makhan. Someone should speak out. And Shankar picked up from there. By the evening, we had a whole thing. Chori vado ghano ho gyo re, koi to munde bolo. Chori bahut ho gayi, koi to muh to kholo. और कौन कौन खाया? तो केवल कृष्णा नहीं खाया. वो सरपंच रुपया खा गया, JEN रुपया खा गया, और क्या क्या खाया? सीमेंट की बोरी खा गया, सड़क के पत्थर खा गया. So what have they eaten? So these were extremely powerful right to information articulations of how, not only what do you raise and how do you go against it. And similarly, Tripurari Sharma, who was National School of Drama, because I'm talking also about these connections of people who helped. She was the deputy director of the National School of Drama, and she came and she made the first street play with us, and that play was called Khajana. And it basically showed after independence the खजाना को कैसे लूटा और कौन लूटा. 3 लोग हैं, नेता, अफसर और पुलिस वाला. Maybe judge should have also been there, but वो नहीं था. तो ये 3 ने लूटा, लेकिन लूटने में फिर क्या करें और जनता इकट्ठी होती है और एक रस्साकसी होती है. She made the next play which was called Dastak, which is inside an office. What happens? The picture when an RTI lands, the whole Dastak play is a proper stage play with an RTI arriving in an office. And what happens? And that those who have occupied offices know what happens. There's a meeting that takes place. People think, can we keep it away from them? What do we do? How do we deal with it? As must have happened in Delhi when you gave your RTI. So the third play she wanted to make that never got made, and which is what I want to put in front of all of you in terms of culture and our soul. She said, I want to know that person who is demanding money in that office and taking money in that office, when they go home to their children who they say, Sache rehne chahiye, and that child knows कि कितना पैसा आ रहा है, कितनी तनख्वाह है और कितना पैसा आ रहा है. What is that that's happening in our society? What is that that's happening in that home? What is happening when they look at the mirror themselves? That play never got made. But that's a play that we need to make. We need to ask ourselves our questions beyond just the right to information. We need to ask ourselves questions about what we are as a society with the other, who we are asking for, and what we are with our own people, with our own children, who we certainly don't want them to become thieves. But are we not thieves? Are we not exploiters in what we do? There is one other thing that I want to talk about in this articulation, and that is at an international level. I went to South Africa when it was 10 years of democracy in South Africa. Just give me an, actually I'd kept a time thing, but there are too many calls coming, so
only. So I have another 15 minutes? 20 minutes, okay. So I went to South Africa, and there was a Communist Party leader there called Jeremy Cronin, and they were discussing 10 years of democracy in South Africa, and South Africa has a very interesting right to information formulation. So he gave that particular formulation at that time in a long speech I just wrote down, because he started off talking about speaking truth to power, which is a very common thing, and of course RTI helps you do that. So I remember writing it down. But then through his speech, he used these same three things in three different ways. And I think that's very important again for when we start talking about how we go into the politics of information. He said, RTI helps you speak. He didn't say RTI. He said we need to speak, if we want to keep democracy alive, we need to speak truth to power. But he said later on in that, we need to make truth powerful. And that's what an RTI activist tries to do, what all of us need to do, what we need to do in the public hearing in the Jansunwai. We take it and we do something with it. We don't just let it lie. And then he said we need to make power truthful, which is the most difficult of all, because they don't, even when it stares them in the face, do anything. And therefore, the politics of information will go, I'll go further on, goes into something beyond just the RTI. It goes into a whole basket of measures. Partly it goes into society for its soul, but it goes into the mechanisms of how do you make this happen and what do you make happen. There's another person who we admired greatly, and I'm just giving different, somewhere a journalist, somewhere a judge, somewhere a bureaucrat, a person called Mr. S.R. Shankaran, who's a legend amongst bureaucrats, who's a real role model, who lived a very simple life. For a long time, he was also slightly not skeptical, but he said, RTI, how will it be used? But he saw us in our minimum wages struggle. He was Secretary Rural Development, and he did a lot. And then he, in Hyderabad later on, he called us for a series of meetings. And he's the first one who said a word that you use, Shalini. He said that this is a transformatory right. RTI on its own means nothing. It's when you connect it to something else that it means something. It transforms the nature of that right. It gives you truth as a basis of saying how do you establish your rights. It transforms the entire discussion on the basis of truth. And the South African Constitution, from Jeremy Cronin actually, says one line, that people will have the right to information in the pursuit of any other right. And that's a very important constitutional formulation to have, because that's what I use it. I don't use RTI for its own sake. I'm not trying to be some voyeur. I am trying to get it to get accountability. I'm trying to get it to get the system to function better. So it is when it connects with some other right of mine that it means something really powerful and meaningful. So in the politics of information, these are things, and I'm just going to quickly say them, that matter. Who asks the question? And most often you see the less powerful. RTI has transformed the relationship between the citizen and the state, but also between the less powerful and more powerful. No powerful person needs to use RTI. They have it already. When we were sitting on dharna outside the state secretariat the next year for 54 days, from inside the cabinet, we didn't need information. They kept telling us, okay, we'll give you, civil society, the right to information. Why do you want this among citizens? We had it. We knew what the cabinet was doing in 5 minutes. Someone from inside was giving us the information. Others today in Aadhaar, everyone else knows. The companies know. They know. And they are the ones who are getting access to it, wherever and however. You will never find a powerful person using RTI. He picks up the phone or he sends someone. It is the less powerful who use it to establish something. So who asks those questions? Who frames those questions? Who gives the answers? Who adjudicates, which is our whole Information Commission framework, which goes into the law? What are the consequences of no information? One of the biggest debates while fighting for the law was, will you put penalties or not? Without penalties, it would have been a useless law. There's a tiny penalty, 250 rupees a day, but it still matters. It's the thing that made it start, made it function. Now they found ways around it, but still it matters somewhere at the end. And here, 2-3 very important things in the politics of information is what is personal information. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act, I want to spend 5 minutes on it. What is personal information and what is private information? Because under the guise of personal information, the way they have defined it in the DPDPA and redefined it in RTI, it means any information related to any person. So I will talk about it, how in the RTI then they have said that you cannot ask about any person. So if I can't get a name under RTI, what's the use? What is the use of that law that's going to not allow me to identify who did or did not give me that right, who is engaging in corruption, who is sitting on that chair, who has got the contract, who has not got the contract, who has done or not done inspections? What's the point in that? So personal is actually the wrong word to use. And yes, private, and therefore RTI did define under DPDPA, and I'll come to this. So one is the question of personal, and the other is the question of public, private. And the third, and it's very important, RTI defined in the exemptions under 81J earlier for privacy, because the word also is privacy. It defined privacy as information that has no bearing on any public activity or interest. That is private. If you have a bearing on public activity or interest, how can it be personal? How can it be private? It's public because you have a bearing on that public activity or interest. All of us have a bearing on each other. And if we have a bearing on, but what has no bearing on anyone else, a public activity or interest, of course it's private. Of course we shouldn't get it. But that definition has been removed by the DPDPA. And what are the consequences of that? That if you have a bearing on public activity or interest, that's why you want information. So public information and information that has a bearing on public activity or interest has what? A bearing on public resources. It has a bearing on who uses bijli, who takes the water from below, who is using or misusing the road, who is polluting the atmosphere, who is causing noise pollution, who is causing anything, and who is doing something positive and who is doing something negative. So it's hitting at the heart of it, the DPDPA, the way it's being defined, by actually destroying our right to ask anything about public resources. And it is the rich who fight under this idea of privacy. It's my privacy, don't ask about me. Even if I'm a government public servant, don't ask about me. Don't ask about where I got my resources. Don't ask about you are drawing a salary. The whole idea of whether it's a judge or whether it's a public servant giving their entire assets and disclosure, you're asking for politicians, but you don't want it yourself. So the bureaucrat and what they do. And as far as the elected representative is concerned, that's another thing that's been amended under the DPDPA. The only line in the entire Indian legal framework that equates the citizen with the elected representative is a proviso to the exemption clause of RTI. The exemption clause of RTI is section 8. It's the whole set of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And the proviso says, provided that information that cannot be denied to a member of parliament or a member of the legislative assembly shall not be denied to the ordinary citizen. We give them the vote, they get their rights from us. If you cannot deny it to them, you cannot deny it to us. If you're denying it to us, you are in effect saying parliament cannot see it. The legislature cannot see it. That has been removed under the DPDPA. So what has the DPDPA done and why is it such a disaster? And that's what I'd like to make an appeal to all of you through speaking today, that each one of us need to get on this. And here also, because your bread and butter also depends on this, the DPDPA is not only going to destroy the right to information which affects all of us, but it's going to destroy freedom of speech. And 3 areas of people The RTI user, of course, and I'll explain. But the journalist and investigative journalism is over. Because the DPDPA on the one hand says that section 81J of the RTI will be amended so that you can get no personal information, period. No qualifier. Earlier it was no personal information that does not affect public activity or interest. That was a qualifier. That's been removed. And now what does it say? That no personal information unless the government decides. And on the other hand, it says you cannot, everyone who is a data fiduciary, defined as anyone who deals with anyone else's data, stores, processes, publishes, does anything with it, which any of you have anyone else's phone number on your phone? How many of you have smartphones? How many of you don't have smartphones? 1, 2, 3, there are some still. I keep asking this question. So in a room like this, it's very rare. There are some, I have some friends as well. Maybe they are much smarter than the rest of us. But any of us who even use those are the two who put their hands up, do you use computers? Yeah, so you're under the Digital Data Protection Act. There, anything in digital form that relates and identifies any person is not allowed to use that person's name or transmit it without their express permission. Now, a journalist will have to ask the 2As of our country, can we write about your last deal? You think they'll give it? Will they give it? No chance. Or anyone else, whoever they want to ask, whoever they want to talk about, whoever's deal they're going to talk about. Earlier and even now, there is slap suits against journalists all over. They go after them and they put defamation cases in different courts, 10 places, 20 places. But still over there, truth is a defense. Under this law, truth is not a defense. Doesn't matter whether you've got all the truth, whether you're uncovering the truth. It does not matter. You cannot use their name without their permission. If I take a photo or you take a photo today and you send this photo, someone in this crowd can say you didn't ask my permission. So it's going to affect social relationships as well in so many ways. And except for an express permission of did you eat mangoes properly or not, yes, you can give I sign off on that. Except for that, there is no way anyone can use anyone's name. And what are the consequences? The fines under the DPDPA are 250 crores. 250 crores. And if you don't do it, it's doubled. It's up to 250 crores, but I'm sure if you get only 1%, 2.5 crores you can pay, no? So all of us are violating that law several times a day. I violate it, I don't know how many times. They will not prosecute me from the first day. They will find their time when they want to target me. And they will make an example, not just of me, of whoever it is who is troubling them the most. And my entire family would say, stop doing whatever you're doing. You can go to jail, that's one thing. If we are going to lose everything because of penalties on top of you, it's the same as the bulldozer Raj. That entire family is suffering because someone is doing activism. That will be the consequence of this. That will be the consequence that this particular law has. So my appeal to all of you, 2,500 journalists have written to the government. 150 members of parliament have written to the government. Every citizen, especially this kind is effective there, should write, should speak out, should get more people to write. It's been held off, the rules, the law is passed. Do read the law. I will send you, please write to me and I'll send you, or wherever we'll send round to all those who come if you register, if you can get registration, please. And with your permission, that's my 45 minutes. So it did ring. So I would like 5 minutes more. But if you can please do something in this, because of the noise that has... 45 minutes, need 5. That's AI listening to me.
which they listen to all of us. So what more does the digital personal data protection law do? It allows the government under section 36 to ask anyone for any information or any source. Anyone for anything. So the government can publish what it likes, it can extract what it likes, and the law was meant to do what? Two things where it's come from. It was to target the metadata companies, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Googles. It was meant to target them, and it's targeted the ordinary citizen. And it was meant to stop surveillance, because that's the other big metadata user, which is government, through Aadhaar, through this, through that. And it's empowered them more, even more. Do look at the law. It affects each one of you, even more than the RTI law. RTI law affects all of you. If you want to use it as effectively as you did use it, it's very powerful. If you don't, it's okay, you'll benefit from it. This is a law that your entire profession will also stop being able to do very many things that, no matter what profession you're in, that you can do and should have in an open society, in a society that's able to not pry into someone as a voyeur, but have an atmosphere where truth can be the basis, where research can be the basis, where knowing can be the basis of what we need to do. I now want to end by saying with two things. Where do we go from here? RTI, we are fighting to move forward. Just now, when I go back from the 10th, we are going to have our 4th yatra for a social accountability law. Why is it we fought for that? Because RTI on its own could not have done what happened because of the Jan Sunwais which we started doing, which have now entered the realm of social audit as well. Even the CAG in its social audit standards makes a reference to something that I'm going to talk about now, is that for a long time in social audit, we also have a skewed society. So we said, if you do in front of the Gram Sabha everything, what will happen? And it took us many years to figure out, in every Jan Sunwai, we were supporting the most marginalized, giving extra support. People gave us support, and we made sure that the voices of the most marginalized came forward. But if you go back to Ambedkar at the time of the Indian Constitution, and one of the things that you see here is in the Byawar Mela last time, you see Justice Shah, Aruna and Wajahat Habibullah standing with an oath to the preamble. And then you see in the next slide where the Constitution of India formed here. This is Jashn-e-Samvidhan, where the Constitution of India is constantly something that we need to keep going back towards and which is being undermined. So actually being anti-national, being anti-constitutional is being anti-national. And then this is based on the Constitution, 2 foundation stones for the RTI Museum, that without connecting it to our constitutional principles of justice and equality, it does not matter, does not mean anything. Dr. Ambedkar, at the 1 year before independence, said that famous quote that I hope everyone knows, but even if you don't, I'll mention it, that we are about to enter a life of contradictions. In the political sphere, we'll have one person, one vote. He said one man, unfortunately, but one person, one vote. But in the social and economic sphere, we will continue to have terrible inequality. So how long will those contradictions continue? And if those contradictions continue, Indian democracy cannot survive. Our aim must be to remove those contradictions. He goes on into the next paragraph, which is less famous, where he says we must learn to build a social democracy. A social democracy, he says, is not just majoritarian rule. It is where the most marginalized are given the greatest voice. It is a combination, a triumvirate of justice, liberty and equality, all three together. You cannot just go by a majority vote. And if you want all three together, it is the most marginalized who must get greatest space. So when we started looking at social democracy principles and social accountability principles, we went, and I'll end with this, in Bhilwara district, in 2011, when the famous Jan Lokpal debate was taking place, which in NCPRI we had a lot of questions with, because it was creating a super police structure with enormous powers, which were very disturbing to all of us.
We went to ordinary people again and said, like, RTI empowers the ordinary person versus power. They ask the questions, the other has to give the answer. Penalty is on them. We said, what should a social accountability law have? Accountability to the people. And they gave these 6 principles, which we now call the Bhilwara principles. They've gone into the CAG auditing standards. They've gone into the social accountability law that should have been passed in Rajasthan, didn't get passed, but which was a draft by government. And the 6 principles are, they said, सबसे पहले तो हमें जानकारी चाहिए. We want not just information, but we want actionable information, not propaganda. तो सबसे पहले तो हमें जानकारी चाहिए. And who were these kids who said this? I'm sorry, they were Dalit kids who had called us for Ambedkar Jayanti, who were fighting Dalit atrocities. And we said, who better to ask than those who were fighting Dalit atrocities? And they said, हम क्या बताएंगे आपको कानून में क्या होना चाहिए? हमने कहा, आप ही बताओगे, आपके ही अनुभव से निकलेगा. So they gave us these 6 on Ambedkar Jayanti. 5 they gave, the 6th we joined, and they were people who were working with us. They said, सबसे पहले तो जानकारी चाहिए. फिर इस देश में सुनवाई नहीं होती है. सुनवाई मतलब मैं देता हूँ शिकायत तो कुछ और लिख लेते हैं. तो सुनवाई must be what I have said, where I have said it, in my language, and I must get a dated receipt. Third is they said, सुनवाई भी होती है तो कार्रवाई की कोई गारंटी नहीं. कार्रवाई होगी तो होगी, 1 साल में होगी, 2 साल में होगी, कभी नहीं होगी, 2 दिन में होगी, completely up to them. तो within a time frame, if yes, by when? If not, why not? A speaking order must come back within a time frame. The 4th they said is, मैं पिटा हूँ, पीटने वाला ये मेरा पड़ोसी है, पूरा गांव है देखने वाला, आप एसडीएम साहब और डीवाईएसपी साहब वहाँ बैठ के कह देते हैं इस शिकायत में कोई दम नहीं. हमें रखो ना, पार्टिसिपेट, आई वांट टू पार्टिसिपेट इन दैट होल प्रोसेस ऑफ इंक्वायरी. तो भागीदारी होनी चाहिए. द 4th प्रिंसिपल वाज भागीदारी होनी चाहिए. They said, keep everyone concerned, which is what our Jan Sunwais do. The 5th is, they said, इस देश में सबसे पहली पिटाई शिकायतकर्ता की ही होती है. The complainant is the first one to be attacked. So you need protection. सुरक्षा होनी चाहिए. More than 110 RTI activists have been killed just pursuing information. So you need to protect them if you want a better society. And finally, we added to those 5 with them the idea of a जनता का मंच. सब बैठे, सरकार भी बैठे और वही निर्णय हो सबके सामने, ताकि जानकारी भी, सुनवाई भी, कार्रवाई भी, भागीदारी भी, सुरक्षा भी एक डेमोक्रेटिक प्लेटफॉर्म में उसका हो सकता है. सच का सच, झूठ का झूठ, आमने सामने बात भी हो. वही चीज़ हमें एसआईआर में भी करना पड़ेगा, अभी जो हम फेस कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि अभी केवल बीएलओ के हाथ में सब कुछ दे रहे हैं. आप ये जनता के मंच में करोगे, जानकारी, सुनवाई, कार्रवाई, भागीदारी, सुरक्षा के साथ, तो ठीक निकलेंगे. नहीं तो सच में वोट चोरी निकलेंगे, नहीं तो सच में एक घर में 80 लोग निकलेंगे, नहीं तो 65 लाख लोग जो बिहार में छूट गए वो छूट जाएंगे. So this is also a call. The right to vote, universal adult franchise is under threat because of the methods being used. Finally, these are the things that constitute culture, that constitute the soul of a democratic India we want to build. They've come from the most ordinary people. I have only reported on an incredible story, I think, a set of continuous efforts, I think, by people who are much worse off than all of us economically, much more vulnerable socially, much less who should be, I mean, have not had the privilege of education that all of us have. So if they have done it and are doing it, what's our excuse for not doing it?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to ask a question or anything, may I, if there are students, can somebody please volunteer? I can't run.
Yeah, sir, my first question is, I have so many experience that even after first appeal also, I don't get any documents, and after several follow-up, finally I get it. And currently I have two cases there, even after the first appeal, it is now 4 months have been passed, but I didn't get any information yet, and the authorities just, within verbal follow-up, authorities just kept me saying, will give me, and my second appeal date have passed. So, and even if I could file the second appeal, it takes 3-4 years. So, what is the solution to obtain the document, bypassing the second appeal, avoiding the second appeal?
So you have given your own answer actually in your own question, because you said finally after following up, I get it. In India, you don't get information in 1 month. The law says in 30 days, you don't get it. First appeal is a stupid process, the way it is. We tried in the law, again in that draft which Justice Sawant also put forth, we said that the denial should come with the senior officer's concurrence so that you don't have to go into first appeal. Then they are also liable for not providing information. Now the senior officer happily actually shields themselves, spends time, wastes time, because no junior officer will not give information without the concurrence of the senior, which is where we go in appeal, first appeal. So 9 times out of 10. Now I can tell you what we do. We have filed very few appeals in the M cases. We file appeals only on points of law. The rest we say हम धरना देंगे, आंदोलन करेंगे, कानून है आप लागू करो. हम नहीं जाने वाले अपील में. आप तो सूचना दो. कानून है आप कानून लागू करो. But that we can do because we have an organization. If you can build that and put pressure, we say we will not go, you will send this to second appeal, then it will take 3 years of waiting. We are not going to do that. We want the information, we want it here, we want it now. We want you to implement the law. We do that in many cases, many laws. It's not necessarily a solution that can be offered to every individual. Individuals will have to fight for appointment of good commissioners, because even when it goes there, if it gets rejected unnecessarily or caught, but you can file another. RTI is such that people, the best thing about RTI is there's still 60 to 80 lakh people who file, even though there are all these frustrations. And I could tell you the story like Sunilji told us, there are millions literally of wonderful stories of the use of RTI. Any RTI room you'll go into, you'll hear. But in every story, that person is pursued, like some doesn't let go. All the law has given them is that much space, and they've used it and followed it. So that's all I can say, that we have to be able to change it to a culture where if they are not giving information, they feel bad. They feel they are not doing their job. Just now we are still forcing it, pushing it out of them, pulling it out of them, and DPDPA comes, forget it then. Then everything is going to say that this is personal information. So first I would say let's all of us make sure DPDPA doesn't come. Second, I would say that we need to fight to make that information commission system, fill those posts, get them to function better. But most importantly, the citizens should spend some effort telling those government offices, we are going to evaluate you on how you respond to RTIs. We are going to push even within a kind of a admin reform method.
Now I have only one option to keep the continuous follow-up and keep record of it in every interview.
You have, yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, let's move on. You can ask your question later.
Namaste, sir. Thank you very much for that. 2 questions. Now, when you say the South African Constitution says that you use the right to information, you'll have the right to information in pursuit of other rights. What I am concerned about is the current Information Commission Pune bench, the one Mr. Makrand Ranade, on record I'm saying this, he asks for what you want this information, despite...
Locus standa is a different question from giving you a right in pursuit of other rights.
No. So what he says is, okay, if there's personal injury, if you have struggled, I will help you in getting that right. You tell me why you want it.
I understand, but the Indian Right to Information Act, that's not going anywhere. that says you can ask the applicant for nothing except an address to reach the information. It expressly says that.
I know that.
Yeah, so
I know
that's-
that. Now,
yeah.
my concern is
Yeah.
when the second appeal, appellate authority, takes such stands, he also sees, acha, this person has filed many appeals. Because you have filed many appeals, I don't find any public interest in that. And then
Yeah,
he...
but that's illegal. That's ultra. I mean, they can say anything. They can say they don't like the color of your hair. Start getting grey hair, then I'll talk to you.
That is...
That they can say, but that's not what the law says.
How do we kick them out? Because the process is very difficult. The Supreme Court's recommendation, and as far as the personal information question goes, even if they don't take resort to that 1J, they take resort to section 11, which says Trayastha Pakshachi Mahiti, which is third party information.
Which is again the same part.
How do we address this then?
Yeah, so you have to address it over a period of time by making sure that more and more information, partly there are many parts to it. That third party was a problem to begin with. We didn't get a perfect law. There are many things we'd like to change in the law, but they are changing all the laws the wrong way. So that's why the campaigns have taken a position, let's not change the law at all. We've not succeeded, but that's why we took that position. It's not that we think there's a perfect law. I'm not here to defend it as a perfect law. But we need to fight in various ways and means to make sure. We'll talk after this. So don't and I'm happy to talk even publicly. So I'm saying that we need to fight to make sure. I think that within the RTI, like section 4, 90% of all that we ask for should actually be proactively disclosed. So we need to collectively fight. RTI came through a collective fight. We are approaching it individually, which is fine, which is good. We want to give every individual a set of rights. But when we hit a roadblock, we have to get into collectives again. That's the only way we can make this Indian system function. So in that there are no solutions as such, there are many strategies. But one thing I will say, अकेले लड़ोगे तो बहुत मुश्किल है, असंभव है. लोगों के साथ जुड़ के लड़ोगे, ग्रुप बनाओगे, that is what will make a difference. That's what brought the law. And that's the story I tried to tell you today. Again, when the RTI came, there were people who had spent, if you had counted the number of days, more than 365 days on the streets. They did not go home to a job. They did not get some land. Nothing. They got an RTI law for the country, not for themselves. For themselves also, but that little bit. Yet they did it. So.
Are there more questions? Yeah, from the back.
Speaking of the age files on Haryana voter deletions, so activists have been using, right, RTI, but ECI is not really giving full replies. Now, from your NCPRI experience, is RTI still strong enough, or do you see any new roadblocks? Or, even when we think of RTI as a tool now to audit voter deletions or ECI appointments or EVM, to either debunk or verify vote chori claims. So do you see any new roadblocks? One, and then another question is, do you believe that the act has been institutionalized enough to survive the political shifts, or does it still survive on citizen vigilance and movements like the MKSS?
Certainly not been institutionalized enough. And institutionalizing it is culturally institutionalizing it. Our constitution has not been institutionalized enough. We will spend generations trying to bring in the idea of equality in our society. I step out of my house, that same house in Devdungri, and I am surrounded by caste inequality. In a city you see less of it, but it's there. It's not that it's not there. But it stares you in the face. Even today in Rajasthan, there is chhuachut even today. So how do I say the constitution says everyone is equal and there is no question of untouchability when it's there? Now I see it every day, each one of those cases. I don't have the capacity to fight alone. I have to fight. I've spent a lifetime fighting. I have to still fight. So when will it come? When do I feel it will come? When that entire society feels, ye kya kar rahe hain? How can we do it? When that cultural ethos comes. And that's why to me this topic of this lecture was important. Now to go to your second question, yes, there will be roadblocks. Day after day, there will be, of course, on vote chori, there is roadblocks. They are not giving us that data. How much it took to get from the Supreme Court, machine readable data. But why did we get it from the Supreme Court? Because the RTI has already taken root to that extent that people are not going to let go. They will block, we will fight. They will block, we will fight. They will block, we will fight. Till a point comes where, like at the beginning when Gram Sevaks went on dharna saying we will not give records, people were saying, "Kyun? Chori nahi kiya hai to kyun nahi de rahe ho? Chor ho, tabhi to nahi de rahe ho na?" That voice will come over and over and over again. And that's when they will be forced, because we have tasted it. It's a genie out of the bottle, you can't put it back. But yes, there will be many, many roadblocks. There are in that, and we have to find ways to overcome it. Initially, but they are saying, they said themselves yesterday, that was at a point when we could get XYZ data. Now we can't get that XYZ data.
So, no, thank you for the lecture. Besides the DPDPA Act that we have heard you talk about, in the last 15 years, 11 years, 12 years, whatever, are there any specific actions the government has specifically taken to weaken the RTI Act, and what are those top 3 actions that you think were taken consciously to weaken the RTI Act in the last 10 to 15 years?
So they brought one amendment in weakening the information commissions and making them subservient to the central executive. Even the state information commission's terms and conditions, which in the law was put as equal to an election commissioner, to give them that level of independence, that even that standing committee that recommended it have said so. They have been brought subservient much more to the central government executive, whoever may sit there, but that's what's happened. So that's one important point. And they know the Information Commission is in that sense a backbone, because a decision taken by the Information Commission can affect the President's office, the Prime Minister's office, the Defence Minister's office, the Chiefs of Staff, anyone, because it is the highest authority by law. So they have not appointed commissioners in many places, so that you get this idea that, okay, मैं second appeal जाऊँ तो 4 साल बाद मेरी सुनवाई होगी. So it's a way of, without making a specific amendment, you just don't appoint information commissioners, and that states have also done, many states. And then they've appointed people who don't go to work, who don't do this, and that's a question we have to ask ourselves. We empower commissioners to be independent with a lot of power. We do, meaning we fight in the laws. And if they don't perform, who's their accountability to? That's a very big question we have to contend with, to which we don't have an answer. And then there are just the idea, the third idea I think is that politically, I mean, if you were to evaluate, there are 3 buckets. There's a citizenry which has been fantastic on the RTI. There is no more robust movement for RTI in the world than the Indian one. And it has done it at threat to life. It has done it in a million creative, wonderful ways. And it should get many Nobel Prizes collectively for in all kinds of ways. Truthfully, it really is incredible. Without using gun, without using the power of the gun. It's an incredible way in which people have used it. The second bucket is government, which should have been welcoming it. Pucho and main dunga. How do I give proactively as many, so that I don't say I'm hassled by these questions, which has been terrible. But most disappointing has been the Information Commission, which was empowered to act on behalf of the people. The law says if the applicant does not turn up, it's the Information Commissioner's job to be there on behalf. It doesn't say neutrality. It says actually to try and get information. They have been the most disappointing. Government expected, Information Commission disappointing, and people way better than, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. Just one comment and a question. I mean, of course, I think RTI in that regard is like any other law which doesn't serve the purpose by itself unless people use it. Like, and that's true for reservation also. That is true for Manual Scavenging Act also. So it, of course, it depends on the implementation, depends on the people. So that is right. I work at the Center for Financial Accountability, and like you mentioned, like different people have been using RTI for so many different purposes. Like after the DPDPA, we are now worried whether we will get the list of willful defaulters, say for instance, who are getting write-offs, the big corporates. And it affects in very many different ways. My question to you is, of course, it requires the civil society and the people to speak up against it, which I think is, there is no other way about it. That we have to do, that is our responsibility, and we have to respond to your appeal. But I just wanted to also know that what is your experience vis-a-vis the political parties, the opposition? Are they understanding the significance? Do you see them rising up to it? And is there something that is, I mean, what is your line of communication? Are your fillers from their side, are they responding to the urgency of the matter?
So I will say on DPDP, because that's all I think that's what you're asking for, right? So on DPDPA, the entire combined opposition for a long time didn't do anything. Actually, the problem is they didn't even understand what's going to happen. Until we went and told them, your next election bhashan, if you don't give it in parliament, you will be taken and fined, because you have to name your opposition. But are you going to ask your opposition to name them in an election bhashan that's taking place? So they didn't realize what the law said. Even journalists did not realize what the law says. But though both those communities have now mobilized, not the political thing, as soon as there's an election, everyone runs off there and forgets about what's happening all the time, or doesn't forget but can't be as much. But the entire India Alliance, the only issue I know, they've come and done joint press conferences on seat sharing. But the only issue on which they've done joint press conferences, as far as I know, is this. And 150 MPs signed it. And yet, the department, the ministry is not even holding a public consultation, even on just that RTI part. Actually, the DPDPA is much, much worse. It needs to be revisited in its entirety. But even within the BJP, we have talked to people. And we have said, one day you will sit in opposition. And even here, the state with so much power as a politician, it's not a good. So individually, they have said to us, many of them who we know, think and talk and think about policy as well. But there is no chance of them taking any stand. And we have tried very hard with both the bureaucracy and the minister concerned to say, please hold consultations even now. There have been so many objections that have come your way. And they keep asserting, we'll do an FAQ, we'll answer in your FAQ. There's no problem with the law at all. But the law is the law. It needs plain reading. So I would suggest some way, I wanted actually, but in Pune, if someone amongst you can take the initiative to hold a meeting on DPDPA where you call civil society, you call politicians of all hues, you call journalists, and you call lawyers. And you just use the law to say what is it that we are going to face. I really think it is something even more than RTI, that's a duty of everyone. So,
am I the last? Okay. So I have been, actually you are the last. Okay, so this is a negotiation between HSS and Memorial Trust in that order. So
actually, I will be the last.
Okay, the last word from Nikhil. So I'm very curious about, we do understand like what you said, we have a very curious situation now where state wants citizens to become completely transparent, whereas it itself wants to become more and more opaque and inaccessible. On the other hand, there is a tool which gave power in the hand of powerless, but now that tool has been modified and given as a tool to the powerful back. But what I'm very curious is, since I work in a scientific institutions and I hear a lot of talk from various departments, one of the constant running thing that I have gathered in last 5 years is that science, what makes good science is where is your curiosity coming from, right? It's a curiosity-led process. Whatever may be the outcome, but scientists find a lot of joy in how they address this curiosity and what are the methods that they employ for it. But as somebody who works in social sciences, here is a great challenge I find for scientific institutions, because just like how the law of defamation became a self-censorship tool, right? Like, do you really want to fight a battle with corporates? They will, slap a defamation suit. So do you really want to have it? In this case, I feel we will start be curiosity-led. Curbing curiosity. We would become what is approvable curiosity. And so we will have a checklist. Okay, well, if I collect data, I have this curiosity. To answer this, I need this kind of data, so I need this kind of method, but I will be in conflict with DPDPA, so let me revise my curiosity. Do you think I'm overthinking, or this is a real future ahead of us?
No, so maybe we could have switched the topic to how do we move from a culture of openness and participation to a culture of secrecy and silence. That's all. So yeah. No, not at all. It is something. People are going to get scared. The point is not everyone is going to get. That's how you use a tool. How does an authoritarian system use a tool? It scares the hell out of everyone. It targets 2-3 and it scares everyone else. That's how it works. It doesn't want to use that against each and every person. It just wants to make sure everyone is worried. So in scientific, the scientific temper depends on questioning. Sorry?
What is since you move around different institutions, are scientific institutions worried about it? They're concerned? They think DPDPA is a possibility.
You have to answer that.
Yeah, you have to answer. You are in the institution, but I think too many of our scientists are technocrats. So then as soon as you become a technocrat, then you're other bureaucrat. Real scientists will certainly balk at any kind of restriction on questions.
Curiosity, yeah. So I guess we should start winding up. I just had one little story and a comment associated. So in 2008 or thereabouts, I was in a different institute before coming here. And the director called me once. I was some dean or something. And he said, we have got a letter from the ministry called Transparency Initiative. And it says that to avoid waste of time in RTIs, every institution should publish everything that it can possibly publish on its web page. Save the time. Now the joke part of it is, after telling me all this, the director says, but don't tell anyone. This is actually a true story.
Yes.
So, but this initiative looked very nice to me. I mean, naively maybe, but if the more we publish, the less we have to also answer RTIs. Did it evaporate, or what happened to it? Or was it there? Do you know about it?
Yeah, I do know about it. Many of us were behind it. It went to every institution because it is a solution, as I said earlier, to when they say we are inundated by RTIs, we have too much RTI, these are frivolous applications. We said just analyze your applications, see if there's anything in this that's, because someone is repeatedly asking the same kind of question, and see if you can put it. Rajasthan has something which I would advise you all, I'll say it, and those of you who are students certainly should take it, called Jan Suchna portal. You should go and see it. It proactively discloses information related to social sector on real-time basis in a completely open. There is no login. You can just go and you can see it. And it has had since 2019, it came out as a result of a dharna using RTI section 4.2 of the RTI, which says you should proactively disclose, it's part of the law, as much information as possible, so that the public has minimum need to resort to the use of this act. That's what section 4.2 says specifically. I see. It's mandated by law. Under that, the Jan Suchna portal was built in Rajasthan. It has 145 departments, 300 schemes, and since 2019, it has had 30 crore visits. Wow. Just for information. It gives nothing else. It will only give you information. But there have been 30 crore visits, and more than 50 crores or almost 50 crores of information have been downloaded from that government information. So it is, and I know millions of people, and I know thousands of pensioners, social security pensioners, who would not have been getting their pension had they not been able to access. Or people getting Pradhan Mantri Awas, or people getting PM Kisan, or many of these things.
Very good. I think thanks to Nikhil. Let's have a warm round of applause for an Amazing talk and a very nice interaction. Thank you all for coming. Good night.
So that I can have the last word. Thank you. Thank you to IISER. Thank you to you. And thank you to everyone else who came and sat.